Have you ever thought to yourself, or have you ever wondered why some people they can understand English and some people they cannot? However, a lot of people at the moment they can understand English really well, but when it comes like in speaking, or it comes a time to speak, nothing comes out. You can't speak because I think this is one of the most difficult problems, one of the most difficult skill to master, of course, when you are learning English or any language to be fair. But don't worry, because I think you're not alone, and this is not just a new skill. This is one of the most fundamental and one of the most important skills you need to master when you are learning English. And I think, of course, you might ask me, how do I perfect my speaking? I think this is one of the most important, one of the most fundamental, and one of the most essential parts from like a skill that you need to master. I think when you probably sometimes you say you watch movies, you read some books, probably, and you understand a little bit of conversations when people, whether it's native speakers or non-native speakers, they're having a conversation. Whatever accent is, American or British pronunciation, or even British accent. But when it's time to speak, or when it's time to someone ask you, probably for example, tell me about yourself, your mind just goes blank, right? But don't worry. As I mentioned earlier, you're not alone, and in today's video, we are going to to explore, we're going to reveal, I'm going to participate one of the most essential and one of the most fundamental, these are the tips and strategies which I believe, if you can follow these strategies, is going to help you to not only to understand even more better, can help you to to level up your speaking like a native English speaker. Common sense is in common practice, right? Have you ever asked yourself why you understand English but you can't speak? This is one question you need to ask yourself and you need to answer, right? Now, when it comes in speaking English or understanding English, you have to understand one thing: passive versus active skill, right? Understanding English in a passive skill is like when you're speaking English is an active, but a passive, like for example, when you're understanding English, people having a conversation, basically you can understand English. That's something passive. For example, in TV shows or even in real life conversations. Passive just means receive information. Like, for example, if you receive information, you watch TV shows or watching people in real life having conversation, you might understand them and you will get your head around what are talking about, what these people are talking about. However, when it comes in real life conversations, you cannot speak. You've probably been training your passive skill, and that's a really good thing and really good skill. I would probably say that's a listening skill, and I think speaking is more active ones. That's normally most people in schools, universities, whatever places they really focus on. And I think probably in terms of grammar and listening, but it's not really enough. Think of it like this: like you can watch someone cooking, for example, on YouTube. Someone is doing something essential, but until you get into a kitchen, whatever place that you get into, you won't know how to cook it, right? It's like that. It's like when you understand English, you can use resources like tools, reading some books, watching movies, listening to people. But when it comes in action, you can't basically understand it. So what I highly recommend you can do, you have to train yourself in terms of passive skill and active skill. A passive skill doesn't depend today because it's not going to help. It's more about listening, and I think it's really important at the same time. Fear of making mistakes. Who knows? I don't know. Probably you might have a fear of making mistakes, because I think these are the fundamental. Many learners are afraid of making mistake. You think, what if I say something wrong? What if they laugh at me? This fear, it stops your mouth, right? To just not keep talking. Even when your brain knows the words, your mind just goes blank, right? But I mean, like, your brain needs kind of like time to translate. Your brain needs time to translate. If you think like in your native language, your brain has to understand the idea first and then get it started in order to translate it into English or whatever language that you're learning. Find the right words. I highly recommend find the right words. Say them clearly and confidently in terms of pronunciation, and then take your time. And during the conversation, people expect fast responses. And so you freeze, right? I think just take your time and you will get there, I promise you. However, lack of speaking practice. And let's be honest, how often do you really speak English in daily life? Even if you study every day, if you don't actually use English to speak, it's like learning to drive, right? Just by reading the manual, not actually driving, that's where the big problem comes. But how to fix it? I would highly suggest you have to start speaking from today. Take action, even if it's by yourself for 1 minute. That is really important because small things at consistently produce big results over time. And you don't need to be perfect. You don't need a partner. Just by yourself in the mirror, or for example, you might practice shadowing in a sentence in English and repeat out loud immediately when you're hearing people talking or you listen to other people are talking. And yeah, I mean, just repeat after them. And you notice if there's a problem on your pronunciation, you will be able to kind of to fix that problematic situation. And I would say self-talk, I think, is very important, is fundamental. Describe what you are doing in English rather than just kind of just reading it. I mean, like, for example, I'm brushing my teeth, or now I'm having a coffee, and I mean, like, record yourself, even in 1 minute, and practice it. Try to listen it back, and if you listen it back, try to identify if there's a mistakes in terms of pronunciation, in terms of rhythm, and all that kind of things. I think that's really fundamental strategy to get your head around. Just stop translating and build your thoughts in English. Start small, right? When you see like kind of a lot of people they're speaking and they're having a conversation, just try to get your head around, and yeah, I mean, just join the speaking communities if you want to, in order to boost your confidence. And yeah, I mean, just for example, I would highly suggest, if you want to boost your speaking and you want to speak even more better, I would say try to use apps like Tandem, Hello Talk, even like go on Zoom calls. That's really fundamental. Practice with real people, of course, in daily life. And if your grammar isn't perfect, communication is a goal, of course. Because I think you don't need to know a lot of grammar. Read, and repeat after it. Repetition builds your fluency. Find, for example, useful phrases and say them 10 times a day. You can repeat them because it will stick in your head. I would say that is really fundamental. It's all about muscle memory, and it takes time, but it will take over. These phrases will become automatic. Watching. Watch, when you are watching, watch it and pause it, okay? Use YouTube videos, for example, movies or even podcasts. If you're listening to podcasts on Spotify or even Apple Podcasts, what you need to do, you need to, when you are listening, just try to pause it. Whatever you found it, for example, a word that is difficult, try to note it down. And of course, at the same time, try to test your pronunciation. That is really muscle memory. And by the time you will be able to perfect it, your training part is just going to help you to train your mouth and your ears, your intonation, and your rhythm. And of course, you'll be even more perfect. And I think that is really fundamental, because I think It's totally okay to understand more than you can speak, but sometimes it's just better because in real life it's important to speak as well. But don't say just like you can't speak because speaking skills is important, and it's not kind of a skill; it's a talent that you need to learn it and you need to master it at the same time. And that's all about it. And I know it takes time and it takes practice, right? But that's all you need to do. And I know that you've got this, right? Kind of what believe that is fundamental strategies that will help you to understand English at the same time and speak English at the same time, like a native English speaker.